Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man back. He's the founder, the boss, the president over at the Article 3 Project. Go to article3project.org. Support everything Mike Davis does. It is Mike Davis. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing well, and how are you doing, Joe?
I'm doing very well. We're watching this guy go completely crazy with the executive orders and the releases of the classifications and taking away the security detail from Fauci and Bolton. Yeah, I mean, just assess what Trump has done. I don't know if there's a better grade than A+, but that's what I'm giving him, just in the first week.
So when President Trump won the first time, he had never run for office. He had never been in office. And I think he'll even admit the mistakes he made included personnel mistakes. He's had 4 years in office. He's had 4 years to reflect. And as we saw, he is ready to govern and govern decisively on day one.
It is Mike Davis. Again, go follow Mike, MRDDMIA, over on social media. Also, the Article 3 Article3project.org. Go see everything that he does. I want to talk specifically about the mistake I made on Inauguration Day. I was watching television, I didn't go. I had a death in the family, so I didn't go to Washington. I considered it, but I didn't go. I enjoyed watching it from afar. Mike, I made a mistake. I went to CNN, and here's the mistake I made. Instead of them talking about Joe Biden, I think illegally, and you can comment on this in a second if you want, pardoning his entire family preemptively, pardoning Milley, pardoning Fauci, pardoning the J6 committee. They were all talking about how Donald Trump dared to pardon the J6 defendants. He called them hostages when he did that. I mean, is that the narrative for the next 4 years, that he somehow was letting insurrectionists go? Did you happen to catch any of that horrible coverage on MSNBC or CNN?
I don't watch MSNBC or CNN, but I would say this. Remember, Joe Biden and his Justice Department persecuted these January 6 defendants. And that's not just me saying this. That is the Supreme Court's ruling last June in the Fisher decision, where Joe Biden politicized and weaponized the Justice Department to go after Trump, his top aides, his supporters, parents outraged by gender chaos in schools, Christians praying outside of abortion clinics, while the Biden regime gave amnesty to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, the Biden family, and BLM and Antifa and Hamas and Planned Parenthood and transgender terrorists. We can't have that anymore. And we saw this. We saw the reaction from these left-wing judges after President Trump pardoned and dismissed these charges for the January 6 defendants, where they made these highly unusual political statements. And that just proves that that Trump's supporters on January 6 were persecuted. You even have the judges being political actors. And that President Trump did exactly the right thing by pardoning almost all January 6th defendants.
It's Mike Davis. Mike, as we watch those pardons, let's break it down just as logical human beings. You're a great lawyer. I pretend I'm a lawyer in my off time. My mom thinks I'd be a great lawyer. But as we look at the cases, the worst thing that happened that day, the most egregious thing one could argue, is getting into a fight with a cop, assaulting a police officer. Vandalism has a certain amount of punishment. Interrupting an official session has an official punishment. Just ask Jamal Bowman, who didn't face any jail time. The worst thing anybody did that day is beating up a cop. I don't know anybody who gets 4 years or more than 4 years in federal prison for that crime. So what was the argument that a guy named like Enrique Tarrio should have been 22 years in prison? He wasn't even in Washington, D.C. that day. What were these judges and these lawyers and these prosecutors and the DOJ arguing? Nobody was charged with insurrection, so that didn't happen. What was it? Because if you beat up a cop, you don't get 4 years in federal prison.
Yeah, so January 6th was a lawful protest permitted by the National Park Service that devolved into a riot. And there were three categories of people there that day. There were people who were there outside and peacefully. And even if you think they're wrong, even if you think they're crazy, they have an absolute First Amendment right to be there. Then you have people who trespassed, who should have been charged with trespass. And then you have people who were violent, who should have been charged more harshly. But the Biden regime lumped everyone together, called them insurrectionists, even though no one was charged with insurrection, and then politically persecuted them. They used a post-Enron obstruction of justice statute intended for corporate fraud to go after political enemies. And all these district court judges in D.C., but for, I think, one, went along with this. This was, look, what happened on January 6th was terrible. What happened with the Biden regime in response to January 6th was even worse.
It is Mike Davis. Mike, all very good points. Can we reform this? Is there a way legally to say the way you used that decision with Enron was incorrect by taking due process away from these 1,500 people? Can it be fixed?
It needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed with the Trump 47 Justice Department opening probes on January 6th, including criminal probes for violations of Americans' constitutional rights under 18 U.S.C. Section 241, conspiracy against rights, and then 18 U.S.C. Section 242 under color of law, opening Office of Professional Responsibility probes, opening Inspector General probes, opening civil probes. This cannot happen again. What happened to these January 6 supporters? They went through hell for 4 years. 4 years they went through hell. Again, while Joe Biden gave amnesty to the much more deadly and destructive BLM and Antifa writers. And remember, Joe Biden pardoned a man. Actually, he freed a man. He let a man out of prison who killed 2 FBI agents. Yes. So I don't want to hear this nonsense from the left that Trump is anti-cop. Joe Biden pardoned a man who killed 2 FBI agents, and it was President Trump, thanks to the Article 3 project's spotlight, who pardoned those 2 D.C. police officers who were unjustly convicted of murder for chasing down a thug who got hit by a car in the chase, and then the police officers got charged with murder.
It is Mike Davis, article3project.org. Go and support everything that they do. And again, he does an unbelievable job in teaching you about the Constitution, then utilizing the Constitution to make sure that our rights are not violated like Biden did for 4 years. You brought up the BLM riots. I can't think of one person that was thrown in prison for 4 years, anywhere near 4 years, and you had 26 or 27 people died in those riots, the riots that somehow were immune from the pandemic. So it's a different world now that Trump is back in there. Can he do anything? Can Pam Bondi, once she gets in, do anything about these pardons for the J6 committee and the pardons for the Biden family? I understand that it's constitutionally sound. It's a broad swath that a president can do when it comes to pardons, but I don't think the intent was ever to preemptively pardon everybody for 11 years.
Well, what they can do, I'm in the camp that pardons are absolute, and the president has very broad and powerful pardon power. But I would say this. What that means now is, for example, the Biden family who got pardons from Joe Biden, the Justice Department and congressional committee should call them in to testify, because they can no longer claim the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. And this isn't just a political witch hunt. This is because our government needs to do an intel assessment. You had a lot of money, over $23 million, that James Comer has been able to track through bank statements that went from our worst enemies into what seems like every Biden member's bank accounts, except for the 6-year-old granddaughter who they don't claim. What were these corrupt foreign entities, our adversaries, buying from the Bidens? We need to do a national security assessment, because Joe Biden, the evidence is pretty clear. Joe Biden was compromised.
Well, absolutely. And that's not even an argument. But having said that, they've been pardoned. If they call in his brothers and his sister and his son, and they sit down and questions are lobbed at them, if they say I plead the Fifth or I won't answer, do they go to jail for contempt? What happens?
They can't plead the Fifth because they got a pardon, so they would be held in contempt of Congress, like Bannon and Navarro were, if they refuse to cooperate. And if they lie, they could be charged with perjury. And I strongly urge the House and Senate relevant committees, the Judiciary, Intel, and Oversight committees, to move forward fast. Again, $23 million in bank statements that Comer's been able to show went from corrupt foreign enemies, our worst adversaries, into what seems like every Biden's bank account. They are compromised. We have to figure out what they were, how they were bought.
Is there enough evidence, Mike, do you think, to charge Merrick Garland with something? At the very least, what pops out in my brain is he had to have been on board in sending Matthew Colangelo to New York, to Manhattan, to go and prosecute Trump. Is there something there? I mean, bringing in Jack Smith, I think that you question him about that. I think there's evidence of lawfare clearly. But is there a statute that says lawfare and you can charge Merrick Garland with using it? Or is there something else that you would have to use?
No, there is. It's called conspiracy against rights. 18 U.S.C. Section 241, when you politicize and weaponize intel agencies and law enforcement to go after your political enemies for non-crimes, that is the very definition of a conspiracy against rights. And so I think there needs to be a criminal probe opened immediately, and then you have to follow the evidence wherever it leads. Nobody's above the law. I would open this special grand jury down in the Southern District of Florida in the Fort Pierce Division, because that's where they did the Mar-a-Lago raid. And this all ties to Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, the whole Mar-a-Lago raid, but I mean, obviously you and I have been talking about this since the day it happened. I think you might have been on this show the day that it happened. We know that was illegal. The show of force they used was disgusting. And the documents case never was a case because, as you very wisely educated us the whole time, presidential documents or the Presidential Records Act clearly shows anything that happened between January 20th of 17 and January 20th of 2021 was his, and he could have any of it that he wanted. So all of that was based on nothing. This would all be the same statute?
Yes. Well, it could be part of 18 USC Section 241, because again, it shows that they politicized and weaponized the Espionage Act to go after President Trump when the Presidential Records Act applies.
And you made the case that, well, if you're going to use the Espionage Act, you have to use it against Barack Obama, who told Medvedev, tell Vlad, once I get reelected, everything's going to be okay. I mean, that was sort of the same thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the most classified information you can have, the thought process of the sitting president of the United States against our foreign adversary. I mean, let's talk about the pardon of Mark Milley while we're on the topic of espionage,
yes,
and including treason. You had Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, telling his Chinese counterparts that, hey, don't worry, I will give you a heads up as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff if President Trump is going to launch a preemptive attack on China. That is unbelievably valuable intel for an enemy to know if America is going to attack, so they can prepare for that attack. And that means it puts American lives in grave danger if our enemies know we're going to attack, right? And so I don't know how the hell that is not treason, and maybe that's why Joe Biden gave Mark Milley a pardon.
But why does Biden pardon Milley? Because I don't think Biden knew who he was pardoning. Who do you think it was that was running this thing? Was it Antony Blinken? Was it Jake Sullivan? Who do you think was the one telling Biden, just sign here? Because on his family members thing, I get it. He was going to do that. I'm surprised he didn't include his own name. But on Milley and Fauci, that had to be coming from somebody else, no?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think part of it is Joe Biden just hated President Trump so much and did everything he could to destroy President Trump. He tried to bankrupt him. He tried to throw him in prison for life. He tried to throw him off the ballot. He tried to even, take off Trump's head when he underfunded his Secret Service protection and said he was the gravest threat to America. I mean, Joe Biden is a vindictive, malicious man, and you saw in his final days in the White House what just absolute garbage he is. And thank God President Trump got to the White House and took out the garbage.
What recourse is there, if any, on the January 6th committee that was unselect, as President Trump says? It was just a committee it was a show. It was produced by Hollywood producers, just to convince the American people that somehow Donald Trump was an insurrectionist and should never be elected again. What can be done about that? I mean, already the House of Representatives has said it was ill-formed. It didn't have proper representation. It had been 5-4, Democrat, Republican. Can nothing be done now because they've all been pardoned?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's a good question, whether the speech or debate clause that Congress gets, essentially congressional immunity, like judges get presidential immunity, like presidents get presidential immunity and judges get judicial immunity. It's a very good question whether the speech or debate clause would protect a member of Congress from a criminal probe for conspiracy against rights under 18 USC Section 241, and I think we should look at that and test it.
With Schiff getting a pardon, does that alleviate him of all the lies he told about Russia collusion or not?
It would alleviate for federal crimes, but if there are states or local jurisdictions that want to bring charges against anyone who gets a federal pardon, they can.
Wow. It's Mike Davis. Go and support him, MRDDMIA, over on social media. Also, article3project.org. I know that you're a big advocate of calling the senators, writing the senators, making sure the senators know you want these people who are appointed by Trump to be confirmed. Do you think that's effective? And So far, it looks pretty good. Hegseth is the only one that's up in the air, but he came out 51-49 yesterday. The obvious losers, in Collins and Murkowski said no, but it looks like he's going to get through as well. Do you think calling and contacting the senators, putting pressure on that way works?
Yeah, I know it's extremely effective because I worked in the Senate. You go to article3project.org, article number 3project.org, and take action. Remember when Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel were nominated, all the very smart people in Washington said that their nominations were dead on arrival. And then we had the Article 3 Project round up Americans. We did a shock and awe media blitz and had them go to our website and do the patch through phone calls and emails and social media posts to their home state senators. We've had 30,000 Americans make about 100,000 contacts with their home state senators.
Wow.
And we gave these home state senators an attitude adjustment very quickly. And so about 3 days after their nominations, we went from dead on arrival to when can they start. There's no question it's effective. It's why Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth are going to get confirmed after everyone said they had no chance.
It is article3project.org. Go there and make your voice heard. Get a hold of your senator. Get these guys done. President Trump said no more DEI. Even Target today, which is not a government agency, obviously said we're going to stop doing DEI. It was that simple, a change of the guard in Washington to wake these people up and say we're going to get rid of DEI. And secondarily, what do you think about these, like the ATF or somebody took the DEI officer and changed her name to the officer as if we're not going to know that she was a DEI hire and was running that department? Can you sift through all of these bureaucratic or these bureaucracies in Washington and stop them from just changing the title and staying on and collecting a paycheck?
Absolutely. I mean, this is what DEI is. It is racial discrimination, which is a very serious federal crime. It's a very serious federal civil rights violation that's subject to substantial, serious civil immunity, including attorney's fees. So these government agencies and particularly these companies that want to play this DEI game need to understand that they're committing a federal crime. They're violating our federal civil rights criminal statutes, and they're exposing themselves to bankruptcy by doing this. So think long and hard about that, because now the federal government's official position is that this is a civil rights violation. So
good.
When Harmeet Dillon's confirmed as the head of civil rights, I don't think I want to be one of these woke corporations on the receiving end of a federal investigation.
It's Mike Davis. Mike, I know you're a little under the weather. I appreciate you joining us today. 10 seconds maybe. What's the next thing Trump should do in your mind?
Trump should keep going and keep going hard, keep nominating the people he wants, keep doing the executive orders he thinks are right, and who gives a damn what the people in Washington say. He has a mandate from the American people. He has a broad mandate, 312 electoral votes, all 7 swing states. President Trump should govern and govern decisively.
My man, thanks for making time today. Get better soon. Let's talk again soon. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, brother. We're back after this. Stay right here.